Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today we are live at Bishopslea School in conversation with the Headmaster, Crook, discussing dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. Rick and I discovered 2 years ago that we have a passion for helping people understand what dyslexia is all about. I discovered that, like me, Rick is dyslexic. He has problems with reading, he has problems with comprehension. As I was growing up, people like that were called dull, D-U-W-L, I think, or dumb, D-U-M-P or D-U-M-B, just to show I can't spell. And we recently decided, what can we do to help more people get to understand what the two of us have experienced growing up. I think one thing that I want to say as we begin is to say, if you are a parent here and you have a child that is battled with dyslexia or ADD, the fact that Rick and I are here means that one of them can be headmaster, and one of them is likely to be a newspaper entrepreneur and publisher and all that kind of stuff. So do not lose hope. Do not lose hope. It's a stage in their growth process. And we are here to try and help each other understand what it is that you must do, not do, to help them fully experience the potential that God has created them and given them. We started this event with a prayer. I think undoubtedly both Rick and I are here because God has an amazing purpose for us, which is still revealing, and we're living that purpose. The fact that with the kind of challenges that we've had, we've been able to be as successful as we've been means that God means to do even greater things with us. So with those few introductory words, what we will do is, Rick and I will have a conversation, him sharing his experiences. I'll jump in where I think his experiences are similar to mine. You will, if you've read around, discover that dyslexic people, ADD people, are strange to understand. Some do wet their beds as they're growing up because it's part of the condition. Others do not, even if they're dyslexic. Some have a high IQ, some do not have a high IQ, even if they're both dyslexic. So we're a confusing bunch of people, but nonetheless, we're a gifted bunch of people. And I think if you have a child who's dyslexic, understand that they're amazingly gifted. And your role as a parent, your role as a teacher, is to surface the gifting that God has given them. So after we've had a conversation, Rick and I, we will then turn to you as parents and teachers, and some students that might be among you, to either ask questions or share whatever experiences that you've had that might help others in the room understand the difficulties that they are experiencing. So we are all here, not because we're experts, but because we are walking a similar journey and we're sharing our experiences, because through collective experiences, we become a better people. So it's going to be 45 minutes of Rick and I, and then another 45 minutes taking questions from you. We'll now turn to questions. Any suggestions from members of the audience? This is an important part of the show. If there's something that we've said that you don't agree with, if you have read something that you think is going to help everybody in the room, please, this is an opportunity for us to ask questions or to share. Raise your hand. Don't be afraid to raise your hand like me. Raise your hand and share as much as possible. Okay, I see a number of hands.
Morning, thank you very much for informative discussion. My name is Mchero Mutizwa. I have 2 children, one 8 and another 3. My daughter's 8-year-old. My daughter's the 8-year-old one, and she is, I guess, what you describe a spectrum child. She's not in normal school, but she's not disabled either. I think where my questions come, I had 2 questions, taking advantage of the mic. My first question is, do you think that, because her history is that she started in a school that had 27 children, she didn't cope. She moved to a school where there were 6 children, she still didn't cope. And now she's in a class, I think there's 4 of them, and she's still not coping. So the question is, do you think that for some of these children it's better to do one-on-one teaching, or is it better to be still in a smaller group because of the social aspect? And then my question is, the second question is, how do you teach beyond the copying mechanism? You know how you're saying that when a child's looking at the board, they literally just always copy whatever is supposed to be, whereas at a stage, the words, I think in grade 2, the teacher jumbles up the words and says, put the sentence together, but she still copies it as jumbled words. So first question is it better for one-on-one teaching versus small groups? And the second question is, how do you move beyond the copying?
Your first question is one-on-one, is it better to have one-on-one teaching? Okay, the best school in the world would have 400 children and 400 teachers. There is the smaller your pupil-teacher ratio, the better it is, obviously. So the one-on-one, yes, the small group does help. And that's what we've learned in our ELP classes, is we only have up to 9 children in a class, but they all have, sort of the same sort of, they're all dyslexic, they're all ADD, and they all have a good potential. But, sort of, you can't have too many in a class. The other thing is, I think parents of ADD dyslexic children must understand that, sort of the schools often can't do enough. And I know it's very difficult as a parent where you're paying the school fees and then you go and you have extra lessons afterwards. Well, I can tell you that my daughter had extra lessons from grade 2 to sixth form. It never stopped. And I mean, a lot of them, sort of we did in-house, I did them, but she always had an extra lessons teacher. In fact, we did an experiment with her here at Bishopslea many years ago when she was in grade 5. For grade 5 and grade 6, I did something that hadn't been, I don't think it had been done in a school before, is she went to the class up until break time. And then from break time till the end of the day, end of the morning, I personally employed a teacher to go back and do the maths and the English and the reading and the spelling. And that worked incredibly well. And I actually gave a talk to the Remedial Teachers Association after that on, sort of allowing children to perhaps go out of mainstream class instead of having to do it in the afternoon. So yes, it takes a lot of work. There is no, in education, there are no shortcuts. There's no tricks. It is based on solid, hard work, and it is a very long process.
Okay, and teaching beyond the coping mechanisms?
I didn't quite understand the second question.
So for grade 2s or 3s, I'm not sure which grade it is, like when it's they're learning words. So the teacher will put, this is a cat, but would write, is cat this? And then would ask the child to put the words in the right sequence. So on the board says, is cat this? Child must then write, this is a cat. But for my daughter, she just literally writes, cat is this.
Oh.
The ability to translate which word comes first and then in which order. I guess, I don't know if it's a technical question, but it's about how do you move beyond just the copying from board.
Yeah, that's, I think, have you had, have you ascertained what your daughter's problem is, though?
Yes, I have.
Okay, she's been to an educational psychologist. Okay, I think all of these are fairly typical, I think, of that, especially in the grade 3. I think also it depends on how well she's actually able to read those words. Is she able to read them, or is she looking at them in pictures? Again, I go back to this teaching of whether they were taught look and say. Was she taught look and say, or was she taught phonetically?
So that's also part of my concern as a parent. It's a combination of both. Some of the words are look and say, and then some of the other words are phonetics. So cat is definitely phonetic, ka, ata, but this is this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Are there experts in the room that can help with that issue? You can help?
Okay, my name is Nyasha Beremauro. I'm an occupational therapist specializing in pediatrics. Firstly, just to answer your question, I think you were speaking more on dyslexia and ADHD. Dyslexia is one of many what we classify as learning disabilities, learning difficulties. So when you take your child for an assessment, maybe to a psychiatrist or to a clinical psychologist or sometimes to an occupational therapist, we use what we call the DSM. It's called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So that one, it will show you the symptoms that your child is presenting with. There are so many. There are many, but I think dyslexia being the most common and the most understood, most parents maybe say, no, I think my child is dyslexic. Sometimes it's not dyslexia. Sometimes it's what we call dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is just a difficulty with maths, arithmetic.
Okay.
Yeah, it could just be that. They could be okay with reading, with everything else, but when it comes to maths, it's not there. Sometimes it's just a difficulty with writing. They're okay with reading, but when it comes to putting down on paper, it's now difficult. So the important thing is identifying what your child is struggling with. There's also another condition called intellectual disability. Intellectual disability is now affecting, like, with dyslexia, the intelligence could be okay, but with intellectual disability, it's going further into now the intelligence, the cognitive processes, the memory, the attention. So it's now a different, so it's very important, I would say, to parents to identify what it is, to go to a professional. Ideally, I would say, seek different opinions and really know what your child has. When you know, you're equipped to help them. And just to maybe just give a bit of clarity,
absolutely.
The new Diagnostic Statistical Manual, it's called DSM-5, has now classified, we no longer have anything called ADD. We now have ADHD, AD stroke
ADHD.
Yes. So we have what's called an inattentive subtype. These are the kids who struggle with paying attention, the kids that, they have everything. It may be what you're talking about. When you have a conversation with them, they can speak. But when it comes to putting it down on paper, they're looking around, they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
They have the inattentive subtype. And then we have hyperactive subtype. These are the ones who are running around. They can't seem to sit down. They can scribble through their work, but, they don't really, it's like they have a lot of energy. And then we have combined. Now they have all of it. But it's now all called ADHD. You will not, if you still have professionals saying no ADD, well, some of them still use the older text, but the new and current information is saying we only have ADHD. And maybe just to give a bit of information about occupational therapy. So what we do, I'm based at Hartman. At Hartman House, we have got an occupational therapist and a speech therapist. So we identify, we have a program, a lovely program that we do with grade 0 and grade 1. We try to identify what exactly a child is lagging behind, because we have different aspects of, for example, their memory, their concentration, the attention, sometimes the processing that you talked about. You know, we have processing of auditory information, how we're making sense of auditory information, or, you know, of visual information. You know, a teacher might say, oh, your child, I think those are one of the first things that show that maybe a child is struggling, who has dyslexia or any of, they copy, you know, they write a B instead of a D. They go and get their eyes checked. They say, no, they're fine. There's nothing wrong with their eyes. But then now you go into the processing now. Is what they're seeing, is their brain processing what they're seeing correctly? So then they would need to go for therapy. They would need to go for speech therapy. They would need to go for occupational therapy, so that in those what we call windows of opportunity, this is from like the ages of grade 0 to about grade 3, we try to build on those skills that are lagging behind. Okay. It's about working on the development and working on the skill. But if we still see, I like to say maybe at grade 3, grade 4, if we have done the therapy, if we have helped them, if we have, you know, put the mechanism to support them, but they're still struggling, now we need to come up, okay, you know what, maybe it is ADHD, maybe it is intellectual disability, because some kids just have developmental delays, but we need to support them so that they realize their potential. Like you're saying, that sometimes they only connect the dots when they're older, but sometimes they can connect the dots when they're younger, when we support what they're struggling with.
So a question to you, how do you get a sense that people appreciate the services that you're providing?
To a certain extent, I think after a lot of convincing and, you know, trying to make them understand. But I don't think that in general, you know, our education, it's only a few schools. Like I mentioned, I think we only have 2 schools in the country that have occupational therapists and speech therapists. But when you look at, you know, South Africa and the UK or America, every school has got an occupational therapist. Every school has got a speech therapist.
Fantastic.
Because when we look from grade 1 to its development that we're looking at.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Awesome stuff. There's a hand at the back there. Thank you. And another one at the front.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Marlon Yakabau. I'm the co-founder of Dyslexia in Africa Trust. I'll just pass a quick comment first. That is that there's a lot of focus on clinicians, and really it's not about clinicians. It's not about people like me, like doctors, or people that have clinical background, people psychologists, therapists, and so forth. This is about education.
Right.
Just from what Rick was saying, or even from your story, it was about a teacher who just did things in a different way, paid attention, was patient, and then that did achieve a lot without actually getting sometimes a proper diagnosis. So we're seeing this transition where people are now focusing on clinicians when really it's about education. And it's important to say, because the medical aid societies are refusing to pay educational psychologists because they're saying this is a clinical problem. Go to a doctor first, get a doctor's note, or see someone who is registered with a clinical practice. So that needs to be corrected. Now my question to you, Rick. In our experience, we've seen, as it has been shared, that it's mostly the wealthier schools that have facilities. It was quite exciting to learn about your ELP program. So it's mostly the wealthier schools that have initiatives in place. What needs to be done at maybe policy level to ensure that there's something out there for the rest of the country, the poorer schools that are out there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an important point, Rick. This is a great school, but not so. It's only a tiny population in Zimbabwe that can access the amazing services that we have. What do we do at policy level to ensure that this is propagated all across the nation?
Well, I think we have to put it into perspective first. What we've done here, many schools have remedial departments. But I think there's a bit of a confusion between this. And What we've done is we've found that there's a problem with actual remedial departments. And that is that within the class, we've already heard of the different problems children can have. Now, if you look at children that don't achieve in a class, there are a number of reasons that they don't achieve. Now, it can be from, as the occupational therapist there said, and of course occupational therapists, we use a tremendous amount, and to the first question, I suggest you do go to an occupational therapist because they would certainly help with that. I should have thought of that right at the beginning. But children in classes don't achieve for many reasons. One of them might be a limited expectation. Others might be gaps where you go back now and you have to go over what was not covered, and that might be because of illness, bullying, parents traveling when the children were young, and what is taught in grade 5, for example, is premised on having a child having understood what they learnt in grade 3, so there's a gap there. Or there's a third, where these children are ADD and they're dyslexic, and but have a high potential and don't achieve. What we found is with remedial is that remedial tends to say, right, well, we've got all these children, let's give them to the remedial teacher and ask the remedial teacher to sort them out. So you're lumping all of these groups of children together, which we feel is not fair on the children or on the teacher. So what we've done here is we have a remedial department here at Bishopslea. And the children that have the other problems go to that remedial department. They go once or twice a week or however many times they need from the class to there. What we've taken is these children who have a high potential but don't achieve because they're dyslexic and they're ADD and they need to be taught in a different way. We've taken those children out of the equation and we've created a class where they can be, in fact, we've got 4 classes. It's not one class. We've got grade 3, 4, 5, and 6. So they're just an extra class where they've got their own class teacher. They still do everything else with everybody else, and they follow the mainstream curriculum. But we've taken that out of the equation. Now, to put your question back into perspective, is I've tried very hard to find another school in the world that is doing what we're doing, and I can't find one. As a mainstream school, we are the first school in the world to do this.
I think the point that you raise is fundamentally important, and I think for me it touches at something that I hoped, and I still hope is going to come out of this, that this is a group of parents and teachers that are concerned about ADD, HD, dyslexia, and we've got practitioners in the room. Can we start an organization, a movement of people that are passionate about this thing? Because it's only us who understand how important this is for the entire nation. Imagine how many kids have been left behind because they were not understood. And we are in an urban environment, in a privileged school and that kind of stuff. What about out in the countryside, where a huge part of our population is not understood and are treated this way? So for me, I would say the challenge is upon us to say, how can we organize ourselves in a manner that we, with the experts that are in the room, can influence the crafting of policy to ensure that what Rick and them have put together can be propagated and replicated all across the nation. So thank you so much for raising that question. I see another hand. Sorry.
There is, of course, a senior school that caters to these children as well. There's St. Christopher's. But that's a bespoke school. When I say we're the first mainstream school that incorporates this, we're not a bespoke school. We're actually trying to do this. There are, I'm sure, schools around the world that try to do this, but do it independently.
Okay. All right. I see a lot of hands. We will get to all of you. Please stand up and ask your question as briefly as you can so that everybody has an opportunity to ask or contribute.
I'm Christine Lindwe Moyo. I am a classroom practitioner, I want to call myself. And since 1994, I've been working with the children with learning difficulties. Somehow I found that, I had a passion for that. So what I wanted to say is that as teachers, I think we take so much for granted. But what I found out about these kids is you cannot take anything for granted. Because when I was listening, I think, to an earlier speaker, she was talking about a child who is struggling this and that, and I was going through everything in my mind, that when I teach, sometimes, directions, we read from the left going to the right. I've got arrows in my classroom to point out the direction for them so that they don't mix up things. Lots of patience, is needed, because we do not learn things at the same time.
Yes.
So we need to exercise a lot of patience. And I found that there is after they've been assessed by the psychologist, occupational therapist, even if they have the same condition, they are still individuals. So if you take them as individuals, the first thing is you have to connect with them. Have a relationship that they can trust you, that they can, be able to be free with you, to be themselves with you, so that they are able to do that which they can do. Because it doesn't matter how difficult things are, there is always that one thing that they can do. And I've also found at looking at other aspects of the learning process, whether it be sports, if they are excelling in something, praise them, because that's their strength. If they are excelling also maybe in music, praise them. That's their strength, that's their key. And then use that to impact on the academic aspect where their challenges are.
Wow, awesome, thank you. I suppose as the mic is moving on, there's a gentleman here who's been raising his hand and is going to get so very soon, up front there. I think as the next speaker is getting ready to ask the question, is understand that none of us know the purpose for which God created your child, okay? So it might not be, you might think it's maths, you might think it's running, you might think it's whatever, but we don't know. And our role, apart from stopping them killing themselves when they are young, is to ensure that they are ready for any opportunity that does arise later on in life. Yes, Mom, please ask your question. Say who you are and ask a question.
April Thompson, and I'm a mother and a grandmother. And what I wanted to ask was, you haven't touched on any of the nutritional supplements like omegas or Ritalin and physiological supports. I know it's controversial, it's a bit of a hot potato, nobody really wants to talk about it, but I'd like your opinion on it. And if you've seen children within the school using different support mechanisms, and whether you have a strong opinion one way or...
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You heard the question?
Yes,
Please.
I did. Okay, Ritalin, I think, is rather misunderstood. I think many people presume it's a cure. It isn't. What Ritalin does is it has a period of time that it works. It's a couple of hours, and you take the Ritalin, and for that period of time, it allows as far as I can gather, the impulses through the nervous system and the brain to speed up. And for that period of time, that takes, because it's speeded up, I believe that the ADD, somebody who has ADD, the impulses are very fractionally slower and that allows for the distractibility aspect. And it works differently for different children. We've seen it where some children, there's been an extremely positive effect. Others, it hasn't seemed to have very much effect at all. Others, it seems to react with them a little bit. There's a very small percentage. What has to be very, very carefully monitored is the dosages. And that has to be done by trial and error involving the school over a period of time to get it to actually see whether it is going to work. It's also a personal preference. Some parents are very much against it, and some, sort of are prepared to try it. It's not something that schools have a right to say you should put your child onto Ritalin or shouldn't put your child onto Ritalin. What I can advise with regards to the supplements is that there was an incredible amount of research done many years ago in UK, and there was a BBC program on it, on omega-3, and how the omega-3 actually allows the impulses, the taking of omega-3 to speed up to speed up a little bit, and that helps with the distractibility. I think initially when they brought it out, there was the complete transcript of it on the internet. It has now been abbreviated and has become politically correct, I think, and they've taken out a lot of the specifics out of it. But certainly at that stage when it first came out, the research showed that it was 3,000 milligrams of omega-3 a day, whether you're 7 or 70. And the research showed that had a very, very positive effect. Now, since that program, I've been taking 3,000 milligrams of omega-3 a day. And
is that why you are?
Well, let's put it this way. Just over a year ago, I ran out. And a week later, I had a delegation from the office ladies in the office come and ask me.
What had happened to you?
What had happened to me? We've seen a huge effect. It's just the omega-3, not the 6, 9, and 8. And sort of, as you can see, it gives you nice skin and hair as well. So it's worth taking. I can't tell you how many adults I've put onto it, and they've come back. Many have come back and said it's literally changed their lives.
Fantastic. I would want to hear from the occupational therapists. What's your view on supplements, if any at all?
Also experience a lot of the kids that I see that sometimes they do consent to supplements, but I agree, like with Ritalin, they use it, it works for a certain amount of time, and once they stop, it's like they're back to, it's like sometimes it's worse, especially with hyperactivity. So I think there's a lot of discretion that needs to be used with medication in conjunction with your physician, with your doctor. The amounts is really important because, some of them, I've seen some kids who get rashes, side effects. So, medication works on some kids, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. I've also heard about what's called CBD oil. It's like the marijuana oil, and they take away the THC. Apparently they're making one for kids with ADHD. I think what I don't really agree with some of these things is the research. Has it been researched on the African population? Most of it is coming from the West, and we don't really understand how, the effect on the kids in the country.
Fantastic.
So I would say if you want to try, some say diet. There's one diet called GAPS diet that takes away some, I think starch. They're saying starch affects attention and concentration. So I would say to parents, try out, but know your research, because there's so much on the market. But the research is very important.
Thank you so much. And use with a specialist. Let's move the mic to the gentleman up front there.
Thank you, Trevor, for putting this together. My name is Des Nikadzino. And part of what I wanted to say too was mentioned by the lady at the back there, and it has to do with this aspect we're talking about, the nutritional side. Especially, there's the nutritional side, then there's the medication. I'm not looking at the medication side. But I find it interesting, from part of my reading and research, And Rick, what you mentioned about how in your family, all of you have it and had it. And an aspect, I think we're here largely because we're looking for tools.
Yes.
Put into our toolboxes to
Yes.
fix this.
Yes.
And in reading this, I just had a moment where things just clicked, where I thought, that seems to make so much sense. How diet, from the time we're babies, or even fetuses in our mother's uteruses, there's a certain something or some things that we eat or don't eat. And we can subsequently be born lacking some of those things. And subsequently we have a family and we call it genetic. But it might also have a component in it where it's simply, well, what do we naturally eat in our home? And it's something that perhaps we should also have on the front of our minds. I'm not a specialist, but it made sense to me that it's something that we should do some research on. And there may be experts in here that definitively can say that. But as we can see, the omegas are coming up, and the reading on them in terms of what they do certainly seems to help, especially with the inattention I found. So just my contribution to parents looking for.
Thank you very much. There's a hand there. Whilst the mic is moving to the hand, Rick, you want to jump in quickly?
I just wanted to say with regards to nutrition, many years ago, the red coloring that was used in food was a coloring called tartrazine. And that had a terrible effect on ADD children, where they would have a juice or something that contained this tartrazine in it, or a hot dog that had it in the red coloring that they used to put in those days. I don't know whether they still do, and that would set them off. But certainly, the purer the juices that we're having, instead of all of these ones with all these E's, all these colorings in, does make a very, very big difference, as of course does sugar intake.
Okay, thank you so much, Rick. Yes, ma'am, if you could say who you are and then ask your question.
I'm just a parent.
Okay.
So I have my son, he's 8 years old. He struggles with dyslexia and the ADD half of whatever. How do we, he had a very bad experience in grade 1. That was probably his, I guess, equivalent to what you guys experienced. They tried to catch up in grade 2, grade 3. How do we close the learning gap? Does it ever close? Because it just gets harder and harder the older he gets, which he has expressed. We try extra lessons. His school, we're doing BioLink, we're doing OT, they're doing remedial. He has not given up. He's a very determined child, thankfully. He thinks he's good at everything, which is
That's good.
helpful.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to read. He has no idea how to spell at all. He can code break words, but his writing is hideous.
How old is he?
He's just turned, he'll be 9 this year.
Okay.
So he's in grade 4 now. So another just side note is how important is class placement, like where he's sitting in the class? Should he be directly facing the board? Is that going to make his life easier? Or should he just be sitting next to the teacher, no matter which way the board is facing?
Wow.
I'm trying to advocate, and as a parent, advocating for your child is very difficult in this country, in my opinion, in my experience. And I'm trying to make his life easier, but, in some aspects he's getting help, and in others, we just seem to be going nowhere.
Okay. Wow. So, Rick, you'll come in here. What you've described is essentially was my condition until around about that age, and even beyond. And as I sit and talking to you right now, most of those things have not gone away. It's been a question of me realizing the gift that I have and applying myself, forcing myself to read to the extent that now I cannot stay without a book. But it takes me ages to finish a book. So I hear a tone in your voice of wanting to give up, of frustration, there's something special in that child. And what I would encourage you, I'm not an expert, but I can empathize, I can connect with what you're saying because of what I've come from. What I would say is, do not give up. Have as much patience as possible. Rick and the experts in the room will help that. But I think for you as a mother is to stand behind them and give them all the encouragement that they need. There's something special in that child. And it's you to create that environment that external factors can come in to influence them to become what God has decided that they will be. You and I don't know what God intends to do with your child. Rick, any speciality or anybody in the room that would want to add on to that?
I think you have, as I said, it's a process. And it's a long process. It's a long, long road. And it's something that you just got to keep on working at all the time. I remember my mother once said that, sort of with these children, talking to us, to us siblings with our children, said, God dealt you a hand. Sort of how often in a poker game does your pair of nines, sort of outbid, sort of, or win the pot since somebody's holding 3 kings type of thing. Sort of, you play the hand to your best ability. The other thing is, sort of what we haven't really touched on, and it would take a long time to do, is the lessons that we're learning in the ELP with regard to teaching strategies and the differentiated teaching, which we can help many, many teachers, and where what we would like to do is influence education and influence how the perceptions of teaching within the classroom. But that's a big topic.
Sure. I think today we started a conversation that's likely to go on. A few hands. We'll take 3 hands before we close. There's a hand at the back there. Please go ahead, ma'am.
My son was diagnosed with ADHD. I then came to Rick to try and find a place for him here at Bishopslea. Unfortunately, he couldn't take him in. But that's when we realized that my older boy also has ADHD. He was on Ritalin. We tried to tell him, you need to carry on. He's refused because he says it's just, so slows him down. We've had a terrible week this week. He didn't have my younger son is also ADHD. He didn't have the Ritalin, and the teacher said it was a nightmare. So I think it's also us parents that need to accept the child's condition. Because the more you deny or you think it's not my child, he's clever, he's just been stupid, he's not listening or concentrating. We as parents have to accept that that's what's happening, and we have to also gain the knowledge and research, so we're helping our children. So first of all, it was just to say thank you, Rick, because he gave me advice. I tried to put that, and it helped me a lot.
Thank you so much. There's a couple of hands. There's a gentleman at the back there. There's a lady at the back. Let's get through those 3 hands.
Rick, I wanted to ask you, were you disruptive in class, from what you can remember?
Was I disruptive?
Yes, with the other kids and in general, in class.
I do remember in grade, I must have been grade 4, being disruptive, but by grade 5 it was beaten out of me.
Yeah. As the mark is going to the next question, I see your hand, sir. I'll answer that question, sir, and say for me, I was never disruptive. I think it was beaten out of me the day I started. And Mom, to your question, do they sit up front or at the back? I preferred the back because I never wanted anybody to see me. But here's the thing. As I grew older, I began to compensate for all the problems I had. And I began to be loud. But it's a mask that I wear. The person inside is a timid person, is a coward, but he's been beaten so much that that he's decided that he's going to wear this mask that is scary so that you don't reach to me. Let's get to the next question.
Hi, my name's Jamie. I'm dyslexic. Possibly a parent. I don't know yet. I was diagnosed as an adult and in the UK. And when I was diagnosed, I don't know if you've heard of this, but they tested me for something called the Erlen syndrome. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yes.
And it made quite an impact on me because she said to me, the educational psychologist said to me, when you read, can you see one word at a time and do words jump out at you? And I looked at her and I said, yes, like it was normal, you know. And she said she had about 10 sheets of transparent paper and she jumbled them all around and changed them. Eventually she got 3 different colors. And she put it on the page, and as she put it on the page, all the words just sat still on the page. So from little, when I started reading, I could read one word at a time, and all the words just jumbled up around me.
Wow.
And it was such a big thing for me, and I never hear anyone talking about it. And she said it goes hand in hand with dyslexia. So it was just, I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yes, heard of it, of course, yes. And there are children. It's not so much, it hasn't been, years ago, about 10 years ago, we were testing all children and looking at it and looking at the different colors. My experience is that it's not every dyslexic that suffers from that. The words jumping out don't affect me, for example, and don't affect a number of people I know who are dyslexic. But I do know a few people who see that, who look at a page and it seems to move all the time, and they put a particular colored sheet over it. It's just a film of plastic that's colored, and you put it on, and it seems to bring the words back, stop them moving. So yes, it's that again. We wouldn't do as a school, but certainly we would ask that the educational psychologists, the occupational therapists, that's part of the things that they would do in their assessments.
Yes, sir.
Hi. My name is BJ Bone. I also experienced what you guys have experienced. I've got a kid with the same sort of scenario. But the point I wanted to bring up was with your ELP, are there other schools in the country doing it? And everyone sort of seems to be going through and trying to find out through their own methods and whatever to deal with their own programs. We either need to come up with an option where there's like one place where we can go to and come through with an individual, like a group place where you can come through and sort of go through with your kids and get the individual sort of help a way forward for your kids. I don't know if we can come up with that option, going forward. I don't know, put it to you guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Rick, you want to respond to that?
Well, as I said earlier, the way we're doing it is where we're taking, we specifically, in the ELP, it's specifically for those children who are dyslexic and ADD, and they need to be taught in a particular way. So we've taken them out, but we believe as I said, we're the first school in the world that's actually doing this in this particular manner, not having, not mixing it up with the remedial, which it deals with all different children as well.
But your point goes back to the couple of points that have been raised, which is we need a national approach to this issue. And I want us to surface that issue going forward. And I think with the help of Bishopslea and our team, see whether we can coalesce around something.
Can I just make a point here? This isn't a national approach. I've taught in the UK. I've taught in Greece. I was head of a British international school in Greece. I was there out of the country for 11 years doing education. This is not just a Zimbabwe problem. This is a universal, it's a global problem. The whole world is not recognizing and dealing with these children. I don't know whether it's because the education systems can't afford it or it's not there. I told you that I went back to further my studies when I was 27 years old. I'd been teaching. I understood what was happening in education. And yet the education lecturers, when I asked them about dyslexia, went straight off. They wouldn't even talk about it. And that was, you know, sort of when I was 27 years old. So it's not something that is being understood, and it's certainly not being addressed enough anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. I've had experience in South Africa. There's a small movement that's starting, you know, around these ideas, what to do, because parents are isolated, teachers don't know what to do. It's time we start doing something. It's a problem that has not been properly addressed, but that doesn't stop us from coming up with something of our own. The last question, there's a lady there with the mic, ma'am. If you could ask a question.
Yes, I am just an educationist. I was just wondering, we have a lot of people that are offering extra lessons, and as a school, we're a boarding school, and we have a lot of pressure from parents to have extra lessons for their kids on the weekends. Personally, not with my education hat on, but as a mum, the worst thing I can do to my son is make him do extra lessons with me on the weekend, especially because he's in boarding. So my first question, I think, then is, what is your take? I mean, you've been saying a lot about extra lessons. I would just like to know if there's a specific type of extra lesson. For example, if we've got an educational psychologist report that says their working memory needs help, should we be aiming rather to work on working memory than just English, for example? And my second thing is how often and when, especially if they're in a boarding school.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Rick, do you want to respond to that?
Firstly, there's two types of extra lessons. One is the extra lesson, and the other one is the remedial lesson. So when you send your child off and pay somebody, you've got to determine, and this should be done through the school with the help of the school and on the advice of the school, where the help should be. An extra lesson is where the teacher who's helping the child helps with what is currently being done. So the child's learning something in fractions or is learning something about fractions in the class, doesn't quite understand it, and they go to a teacher who will reinforce what the class teacher is doing to help them understand what is being learned currently. And this should be done with the help of the school, because what you don't want to happen is the teacher in the class to be teaching one method and the extra lesson teacher saying, no, that's not how you should be learning it, now teaching a different methodology which now confuses. So this has to be done very closely. The other one is, if the teacher says, no, there are gaps, that in order for the child now to understand what is currently being done in fractions, they have to have this concept which they don't understand. And that's where the remedial aspect comes in, because it goes back and covers a gap. The frequency, the afternoon, it's a universal problem, which is why when my daughter needed this, I decided to take that step and do it within the time of the school as an experiment. I certainly couldn't say to a parent, you should do this, but I was able to do this with my own daughter, and certainly worked with that.
Wow, thanks, Rick. There's a lady with a burning question. I was just about to conclude. Shall we rush and give her a mic? My conscience would kill me for going away and ignoring that hand. As briefly as you can, ma'am, so that we let everybody go back to work.
Thank you so much. My daughter is now in Form 4. They discovered she had ADHD when she was in grade 5. So we had managed to work together. She managed to get through primary school. So Form 1, Form 2, she did okay. Form 3, I started to see that she was sinking, and she's in O-level this year. How do I help her to study? The school is assisting. She's having that extra help at school, but when we get home, there's a gap in how to assist her to study.
Rick, quickly?
Quickly, I think you need to try and find somebody who teaches study techniques, because that's not normal. Normally, as children get older, they develop their own coping mechanisms and should be able to cope better. But that sounds as though if you go to the school and ask if there is somebody that they know who, and there are people out there who do teach how to study.
Thank you so much. Allow me to conclude by saying this. We'll have to close, ma'am. We'll chat later. Allow me to conclude by saying this, that children are our future. You build a society, a child at a time. The education of our children is hugely important. So we're grateful to all of you who have made the time to come and share your experiences, to come and share your expertise, and to come and share your journey. We thank you for being part of In Conversation with Trevor, which has been recorded live in front of you. Let me turn now to our international audience out on the continent, out in the diaspora and in Zimbabwe. Thank you for watching this special In Conversation with Trevor, which was focusing on dyslexia, ADD, ADHD. Remember that In Conversation with Trevor is a weekly show that it runs on YouTube and all our Alpha Media Holdings platforms. We invite you to subscribe to our channel so that every time we upload a new program, you get a notification. So subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on these amazing conversations. Thank you so much. See you next time.